All right. So we're recording. We are back here at the 360 Labs with Canyon. I'm your host, Jeremiah Bishop, and it is a pleasure to start off the new year with two really interesting guests. We have back Wolfgang Kohl, who is one of Canyon's lead engineers behind the Speedmax. We also have Jean-Paul Ballard of Swisside. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Good. Yeah. So I think it's really interesting because we hear, I think outside of Canyon, we hear a bit about Swisside and the collaboration that goes on. One of the many collaborators that we have with Canyon's engineering and product team. And I think there's always some magic in how does Canyon keep on progressing and moving past expectation, and not just engineering fast bikes, but elegant solutions. And I think when we look at the Aeroad and the Speedmax, you not only have a extremely fast bike aerodynamically, but aesthetically it's beautiful. It's very thoughtfully engineered. And tell us about the collaboration, Jean-Paul.
Yeah, well, we first came into contact with Canyon in around 2015. We were already doing some aerodynamics projects within the cycling industry, and we began to cross over with a few commonly sponsored athletes in the triathlon field. And so, we started to have a few conversations together, and Wolfie and I believe we bumped into each other at some point on a train station, and then again in Kona one year. And, it became clear very early on that we had a very common interest, and that's, we were both companies were very technically oriented. Swisside being a spin-off out of the Formula One industry, and Canyon clearly being the technical leaders of bicycle development in the cycling industry. And, the collaboration became quick very clearly because, we brought some aerodynamics expertise from Formula One that was at a higher level, and Canyon obviously always keen to be better, increase the learning, really sort of promoted that collaboration. The first project was the Aeroad project, and that was really laid the foundations for the Speedmax project that we're of course talking about today.
And so I'm going to see if I can play this clip really quickly because I think it really explains the why behind all this effort.
Van der Poel versus Van Aert, the two riders who've grown up together as fierce rivals. Van der Poel has gotten the better of Van Aert more often than not in the cyclocross world, but the Belgians' results have eclipsed those of the Dutchman on the road this year. It was soon clear that it would be between the two of them. There wasn't even a hint of an attack, though, on the final three climbs, not on the Kliesberg, not on the Quaremont, not on the Paterberg either. They, and we, waited for the final sprint to the line. And what a sprint it was. Goosebumps. It really couldn't have been much closer or much fairer, actually. A very clean sprint. Van Aert slowly drawing alongside his nemesis, but once they crossed the line, he hadn't quite managed to get past. Van der Poel taking the win at just the second time of trying and emulating what his dad did 34 years ago.
So when you're looking at a sprint finish, a typical speed in a sprint finish, I mean, these guys are putting out peak power of 1,500 watts, average power for a 20-second sprint like that. I know that is well over 1,000 watts. How much savings are you getting on an Aeroad at 1,000 watts on a drag race like that for 200 meters?
I mean, I'll jump in, maybe Wolfie, on that one.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, if we talk about the types of savings we were able to make on the Aeroad project, they were pretty big. But the numbers we typically publish are at 45 kilometers an hour. They're almost double that at 55 kilometers an hour, and then higher again. So if you take a 10-watt saving, for example, it's 20 watts at around 55. So the savings can be pretty big. Yeah. And, it's quite interesting because, in a sprint like that, you are literally talking millimeters that can make the difference between winning and losing. Yeah. So Aero makes a a huge difference.
You guys are helping make dreams come true. Matthew Vanderpool said it was the sprint of his life, and we're talking, very, very small differences. And I know that 20 watts over that distance is a whole lot more than 2 centimeters. Wolfie, what would you say makes the collaboration so interesting from your standpoint as an engineer and as a product expert?
Yeah, we always try to find the things which are the same in sports and in engineering. So it's could be the difference between winning and losing. And of course, we did do CFD analyze before, and we do it in house. I did it for the very first Speedmix and the very first aero we did. And then colleague Michael Automite took over.
Mm-hmm.
We bought some software. We had an expert on that, and we tried to do the best what we can do. But certainly, we saw we are on our limit with the hardware, the software, and the knowledge we have. And then Swiss side became bigger and bigger, and then suddenly you see there is somebody who is doing it on the next level. And of course, we wanted to collaborate then with them because we wanted to say.
So Wolfie, with the CFD that Swiss side is able to really focus in on that, it allows you perhaps a little more ability to focus on the materials and a focus on delivering the fit solutions for the Speedmax, for example. What benefits does that have, of course, with developing in a collaborative sense versus doing it all on your own?
Biggest advantage I think is that we have some kind of sparring partner at the first phase of the project. So we always have, in this first phase, we have the design guys, the aerodynamic guys with JP and his team and us. And then it's very, very good to have a strong team where everybody got his expertise and everybody got his own mind about what to do. And then you have to find the compromise. And you have to find, of course, it's always better to find the common points and the common sense of the projects. And in case of styling, manufacturing, and aerodynamics, it's very often and very common that we find common points there. So every surface which is clean and slick, it's easy to produce and it's good for aerodynamics normally. So we try to find the best design at the beginning, and it's always good to have a strong partner on site where you can talk about and try to push each other.
Yeah, I think the team is bigger than the sum of its parts. So what would you say, Jean-Paul?
Yeah, no, I was going to say the same as Wolfie. You know, the key of any project is you start from a concept phase. So we have a kickoff meeting. We say, okay, what do we want to achieve here? What is the goal? And you know, for example, specifically for the Speedmax, it was, of course, make it faster, but it's not just that. It's like we want better hydration integration, better storage integration. We want more stability in the wind. We want better sailing effect. How can we use the wind more? We want to have, you know, Canyon is what we love about working with Canyon, is they're very specific. It's like, these are our stiffness targets. This is our stiffness to weight ratio target. It's not, you know, it's very much not a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
And that's, again, it's very much aligned with the way, you know, me and my team are used to having working in our previous sort of industry in motor racing, is that, you know, you have to not just consider aerodynamics, you have to consider the complete picture. And part of that is weight and stiffness and, you know, rider fit on the bike and everything. You know, we want the fastest complete system. And I really appreciate, you know, working with Wolfie and the guys at Canyon, because, you know, they certainly do, you know, our focus is aerodynamics, but they certainly then force us to think slightly to the right of our core competencies to sort of make compromises and understand those compromises to deliver the best bike to the end consumer, because that's what Canyon knows how to do best.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic point. And I think real world performance is such a different animal than just having lab performance. That's one of the things I think is really fascinating to see this process of establishing goals, and the goals set for this specific project and other projects, to hone in on what is most attainable, to do the CFD analysis, multiple dialogues on what can work best, and then actually going in and validating and seeing how it actually works with a human on board. And I put up a picture of Laura Phillips, of course, who was into the wind tunnel several times to do validation of position, of actual using the bike and putting pressure on the pedals, and really seeing the interaction between the machine and the athlete. Which, can you tell us a little bit about that wind tunnel time and what it's like when you finally get the athletes on the bikes?
So I take this one, Wolfie?
If you want to start with that one, or I can add something later, maybe.
Yeah, sure. The final, one important thing to say is, we talked about CFD before. That's the main workhorse. That's where we do the primary development. We specialize in making sure that the CFD simulations that we do match very accurately to the wind tunnel. So when we come to the wind tunnel, it's very much more of a confirmation of the performance of the bicycle, and then to see how we can then optimize the athlete onto that bicycle. We are very, very lucky in the south of Germany at the GST wind tunnel to have what, in my experience, is the most accurate wind tunnel in all of Europe for these sorts of measurements. So, we test there a lot. Canyon's tested there in the past and currently tests there as well. So it's really great when we finally get a finished product, in this case the Speedmax, when Wolfie and the guys finally deliver not just a prototype but a real working bike, and then we can start developing with the athlete on it. And that's where you then really start to see the true performance of the end product.
So I'm going to explode this picture a little bit bigger so we can see it. But tell me about the cameras on the side of Laura in this particular shot, and what the apparatus is directly above her.
Yeah, so really important is in a wind tunnel, it's a laboratory type environment. What we want to do is we want to measure the performance of the athlete on the bike. What we don't want to, and it's really important that when we're measuring that the athlete remains in a constant, a realistic position, which represents how they ride. But they obviously need to stay in that constant position. Otherwise, all we do is measure the differences of their movement. So what we have is a camera that follows them around, regardless of whether what angle to the wind that they're in. They're pedaling, very importantly, against a resistance, so we can brake. We can apply a brake to the rear roller to 1,000 watts. So the rider really has a representative body tension, which of course affects their shape. And then, we make measurements across all sorts of different crosswind angles. And the apparatus behind, what it does is it moves up and down, scanning the pressure loss in the airflow. And we can actually, we can see where the aerodynamic drag is coming from. And actually, in the wind tunnel, we measure the aerodynamic forces. So we measure the forces, the CDA. But actually, when we do this pressure loss measurement behind the complete bike and rider, we can also calculate the CDA only based on the pressure loss. So it gives us an additional tool to be able to visualize where the losses are coming from to better understand the flow.
Amazing. So you're actually seeing the vacuum behind the rider.
Yeah, we see the energy taken out of the airflow, which is the aerodynamic drag.
Fascinating. I think it's really cool just to look at the science behind it, to look at some of the tools you're using. Obviously, high-level coaching and athletes and teams that I've worked with are using motion analysis, videos, computer renderings of the athletes in a three-dimensional space to look at angles and things like that. But on the equipment side, I think we're looking at really a big step in how the human interfaces with the bike. And I think when we look at especially the cockpit details of this bike, I think it's incredible in not only having an elevated performance, but improved ergonomics and improved control with the bike.
You mean aerodynamic wise or overall?
No, actually bike handling. I mean, obviously braking is improved tremendously with disc brakes, but the actual stability of the rider in the aero position.
So one big step of what we did together with Artifact, Swisside and us was to integrate the complete storage and hydration system and to get rid of this big surface and the big weight of the bottle, for example, which was mounted on the fork and handlebar system, was a huge step for us for the handling of the bike as well. So the weight is now on the frame side and not anymore on the handlebar, and the weight is much deeper than before. So that was already a good step for us to improve handling. And then comes the complete cockpit system with more adjustability for the riders. And then we will add later in spring this year our long arm pad system, which is also a big step in case of comfort and handling for the bike as well. So yeah, I think we at Canyon, we focused on this side a lot, and we think that we have a lot of experience, and experience is a very important part also if it comes to wind tunnel testing. You know, the best equipment, best wind tunnel is nothing worth if you don't have experience on it. And that's why we are also happy to have Swisside on board there.
Excellent. And also, what about the other bikes? So, you know, I've heard about the CF model, which I think is fascinating because we look at, you know, the CF model, and what was the goal with this particular project?
Yeah, we set a goal that we wanted to get it as fast as the previous CF SLX model, so our top of the range model from 2015 to 19, where our guys were pretty successful with. So we set the goal, let's try to get it aerodynamically as fast as our previous top end model. And then we wanted to add some cool features also to translate the DNA of the previous high-end model to this one. So we added this top tube storage where you can have tire lifters, CO2 cartridge on the top tube. We added a high-end bento box and this box on the BB where you can store a spare tire and so on. So this is actually the DNA of the previous high-end model we had. And aerodynamically it was pretty interesting because because for this price point and all the projects we had, we were not able to do a complete new CFD range for this one. So we took the profiles of the aero, and interesting maybe for our customers, we had some more extreme versions of the aero which we could not use because of a conflict with stiffness to weight targets. And then actually we took these profiles, let's say, out of the shelf and implemented into the design of the Speedmix CF. And then day of truth, the first wind tunnel test came, and we saw that we nearly achieved this goals with external cable routings, disc brake penalty, and so on. But then we discussed a little bit, and I said, JP, how much potential is in this design to gain the last 3 to 4 watts which were missing? And then we decided to go again to CFD, design a complete new fork and a complete new handlebar. We wanted to take the previous handlebar before. And then we said, okay, let's invest the time and the money to develop a new handlebar with JP and his team. And then suddenly we achieved it, that this bike is as fast as the SLX before.
That's unbelievable.
And that
really
makes us pretty proud, and I think it's a good story.
Yeah, that's quite an achievement. I think you guys have 5 stars, because it's one thing to make one bike fast, but to have the full size range to be fast, and then have the secondary model with the CF be that fast is really a lot of work. Can you speak to, Jean-Paul, could you speak to the size differences and how that affects aerodynamics? I'm sure that's quite a difference.
Yeah, sure. Like in terms of different sizing, you always have to take into account the profile sizes and how the various tubes interact with each other. So it's something we do know about and we do pay attention to. But yeah, typically what happens with Canyon is when we do the primary development round, the size medium, and then that's the first, say, finished project. And then as soon as that's done, then the future projects, the future sizes get checked. But then, yeah, in terms of sort of the main focus was, again, in our particular role in this project was like Wolfie said, it wasn't just one bike. There was actually a number of different versions and configurations of bike that we were considering with this project. So yeah, and I really like this picture you've got on there now, because it shows all of us. You've got Michael, you've got Wolfie there in the background. This is us working on literally one of the 3D printed prototype bikes.
Yep.
And working on different configurations. We had interchangeable tube profiles. Playing on different cockpit solutions. Again, really, really fun stuff.
Yeah, fantastic. And the silver foil, I presume that's to tape over the seams between objects.
Yeah, one of our favourite tools in the wind tunnel is aluminium tape. Aluminium tape's great. It really fits the surface. You can sort of almost mould it to things, but you'll typically leave a bit of blood around the place as well, because it tends to give you these terrible paper cuts. So yeah, there's always a little bit of blood left in the wind tunnel after a hard days of work.
Yeah, that sounds like training too. So is there still potential for improvement, Wolfie?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I know that sounds like a question.
We developed the past 50 or 100 years the bicycles, so I don't see any reason why it should stop directly right now.
And I think you get to the end of a project and you've learnt so much along the way that you already see what the next steps would be on the further path. So and the equipment and processes that we can use are always constantly evolving. If you go back 30 years ago, you couldn't do arrow-shaped profiles on bicycles. Then they were just simply round tubes connected together, and then came sort of hydroforming and whatever, and carbon fiber, and nowadays we're looking at ultra thin profiles. Like I think looking at the rear chainstays, Wolfie, I think was also, there were some challenges in the manufacturing side of things. So you learn all the way.
Yeah, and there are more tools become available that make previous ideas that weren't possible. So I think, Wolfie, that takes me back to you as far as looking at the conventional designs that we've seen in the last couple years. Do you think that there are any more crazy ideas? Do you think we're going to see a shift to exploring some other fun and crazy ideas from you soon?
I'm not sure. What we see the past 2 years, I would say that the crazy ideas stepped back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we were curious about how much potential is inside, and for sure we tested some stuff of that, but then we had to see that double triangle shape is a very, very good base to design a good bike. And maybe the aerodynamic aspect JP can explain a little bit more, because it's not about cutting a tube off and cutting the drag off at the same time.
The one thing I really love about the collaboration with Canyon that I mentioned at the beginning, we're both technical brands which are driven by science and engineering. So of course, the look of Canyon bikes and the visual aspect is always important. This is a consumer product, but what I really love about it is like, okay, let's look what concepts have the most potential. Let's investigate that, and let's design the fastest bike. And that was the primary driver. So as Wolfie said, we did consider these, beam type bikes and removing tubes and some crazy concepts at this initial kind of kick-off investigation phase. We actually did a lot of concepts based on the old Speedmax, where we were doing various, radical modifications before getting into a new product. And as Wolfie said, you remove the seat tube. Let's take these beam bikes. First of all, you're removing one element that adds to the sailing effect. Second of all, you say, oh, we've just removed the seat tube. Well, that drag, the aerodynamic drag, is gone. Well, it's not. It just gets transferred to the rear wheel, because the rear wheel is suddenly exposed to higher energy airflow. And in particular, to get into a little bit of detail, the leading edge of a wheel, which is a tire, is pretty suboptimal shape. So, you can actually achieve a much nicer shape, a much more efficient shape, and then get that to function well together with the wheel behind it. Yeah. And it ends up as a better overall solution. So, what was great is, we consider all of the concepts, we consider all of the possibilities, we go about it in a scientific way. The data doesn't lie. We let the data do the talking. Then we put all of the solutions on the table at the beginning, and then together, we look at everything, stiffness to weight ratio. What happens if you remove the seat tube? It gets a pretty flexy bike, gets a little bit, so we look at the complete aspect. Yeah. And then together as a team, of course, final say being driven by Canyon, we agree on a concept, and then everyone is full gas in the right direction, developing that concept.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's again, you look at the end product and it's absolutely beautiful, and also it rides even better at yaw angles that are real world. So I think it's a fantastic testament to taking and having this broad swath of ideas and narrowing it down and improving and sort of that process that you go through. So one more question, and this is just out of curiosity, for the UCI and non UCI versions of the bike, what's the difference for you, JP and Wolfie? Because obviously the biggest question that we got when we did a Speedmax episode is the bike looks incredible, but what about for my stage race or road race, and of course the UCI component?
You want to start, JP?
Sure. Again, this is what was great about this project, is that, again, we weren't developing one bike. We were developing a triathlon version, we were developing a CF version, we're developing the UCI legal version. This was a massive project, which was great. And, from my side, of course, you have more flexibility when there are no rules or less rules.
Yeah.
In triathlon, you've got less rules. We can exploit more. We had no limitations on, tube aspect ratios, lengths, what we wanted to do in terms of storage and whatever. As soon as you start reducing those sorts of areas, which you have to with the UCI, you lose a bit of the performance. But of course, that was the challenge. It's like, okay, how do we lose the minimum of performance and carry the DNA of? So we developed the full unrestricted triathlon bike first, and then we looked how we could take all of the best options and everything we learned about that bike and turn it to UCI legal version, and that was a challenge in itself. Wolfie, from your side.
Yeah, for us, non-UCI legal bike gives you much more freedom, and if you don't have something on developing a triathlon bike, that's space. You're always short on space. Also, for the previous version, it was very hard to get the cables inside, to get the cable routing done, and so on. And then, if you want to do a big step like integrating the storage and hydration system, you're completely out of space. If you want to try to put this UCI 80 millimeter beams above your drawing, and then non-UCI legal, for me, it's just a synonym for more freedom and more space. And it was necessary to do the next step on integration and also aerodynamic power.
Yeah, I think it's a absolutely amazing story that you have to be able to develop the triathlon version and then jump right to the UCI legal version without, a completely separate platform. And again, I think you guys deserve a toast because, when you look at pictures like this, it reminds us how amazing it is. When you see the magic moments, you know, the win that is the dream come true, or the course record at Kona. These things, you know, are when everything comes together and science meets form meets function, and it's something that the products are available to consumers, and you know they can, you know, feel a part of this speed. Thanks for coming on board today, Jean-Paul, and Wolfie, of course. Thank you for all the work and enthusiasm you bring to Canyon's engineering projects, not just engineering, but really inspired solutions to problems that meet customers' demands. So thanks again, and appreciate having the time today to talk with us. Thanks, guys.
Bye, Jeremiah.